JoJo's Bizarre Adventures is a manga that has been running for almost 40 years at this point, and I have yet to make a full breakdown of every part. Now, I have made a video ranking each of the parts that I fully read, sorry part 8, in order. But I decided, why not make it a series and just put all the videos together, which is why today is the first day, meaning we're starting with Phantom Blood, on everything I loved about Phantom Blood, which I will still talk about its criticisms, but I will mostly be talking about what I loved about it. Now, Phantom Blood needs no introduction. We've all have watched it at this point. If you are on this channel, you more than likely have watched it. If you haven't, I will give you a little rundown though, because that's what this video is about. A rundown of Phantom Blood with the overall rating at the ending. But one of the things that jump out to me immediately when I first started watching the show, one of the main reasons I kept watching the show, was the fact you get instant action. And when I say instant action, I'm not talking about instant hands. I'm talking about you open up to a scene where a carriage is broken and you're in the 1800s, and no one comes out, but here comes Dario and this random woman who was not Dio's mother. I repeat, was not Dio's mother. And Dario's fake about to loot this man, who we later learn is George Joestar. And George is like, oh, you saved my life. How can I repay you? And Dario, being the snake he is, said, oh, I got something in mind. But that led to what George believed was a friendship and Dario believing was a come up, a lick, if you will. And I really liked that part because it just showed that the Joestars and the Brandos just never had a chance, a snowball's chance in hell of getting along together. Never even a quiver of getting along together, because even though the Joestar was forgiving and nice and kind, he still gets fucked over by the damn Brando. And we see that happen twice in part 1. Twice. But really, episode 1 was always a really solid episode to me. I always felt like they were going at a really good pace, because I already know the manga, it was adapting at least 3 chapters an episode for part 1. But in those episodes, you meet Dio, who comes through kneeing dogs and throwing them in incinerators and stuff. But that happens a little later. But then you have Dio's backstory, where we learn Dario is an abusive SOB. And Dio lost his mom at a young age, a topic that leads to a lot of interesting fans. I will just leave it at that. But eventually his father got sick, and we do find out Dio just ended up poisoning the man, which for a 13-year-old to do, very crazy and scary. But he does it, spits on his grave and says, I'll never be like you, I'll be better than you. I'm finna scam the fuck out of these Negroes. But I really did like the backstory, and even the little bit we do see with Jonathan and Dio as kids, or I'm not even gonna call them teens, because Jonathan was like 12 and Dio was like 13, so they were still kids. That was one of the high striking parts of part 1 to me, because it drew me in so heavy, so it had like a gravitational pull on me. But I don't have to talk about everything Dio did in those earlier episodes, or even the Jonathan when they were children, because this entire thing would be a little bit too long, because I don't have to talk about almost everything Dio does in part 1, and it's just a long rap sheet of evil and malicious crimes. But just know he's foul. Like, throw your dog into the incinerator just because he's your only best friend left in the world, foul. But as they get older and we see things changing, we see a time skip up until they're like literally grown men, like early 20s type shit. And by that point, Dio and Jonathan, out on the outside, you know, they front like they love each other, but on the inside they're like, yo, fuck you, nah, fuck you. With Jonathan not trusting him because, for one, he did something to his girl, and for 2, he did something to his dog, and for 3, he low-key had a suspicion he got his father sick. And Dio not trusting him just because he's Dio. But I feel like the earlier parts leading up to when we do find out Dio was the one that poisoned Jonathan's father and that he was trying to take the Joestar estate and all that stuff. Even to when Dio starts using and grabbing the stone mask, unmasking his no longer there humanity. This part again was really solid, and this is where we get to see two very key and important things happen. Well, three very key and important things happen. For one, we get to see, unfortunately, George Joestar's death when he dives in front of Jonathan to save him from Dio's knife attack, where he just threw a few knives at Jonathan. And two, we get to see Dio versus Jonathan 2. This was their second fight if you count the one they had when they were 12 and 13. And this fight directly led into Cause 3, which was the Joestar estate, the Joestar mansion, where Jonathan grew up, burning. Now, I feel like all of this was really well written. I actually love this part, like the ending of this part, once the Joestar mansion burns down, because you see how far Jonathan is really willing to go to put Dio to rest. It was times he emerged out the fire just to catch Dio lacking. And then after that, we have when he meets Will Zeppeli, trains with him, and then they start going on missions to essentially hunt Dio down. And while everything within me wishes this part was so much longer, because I always wanted to see the dynamic between Will and Jonathan unfold just a little bit more before we see Will die, it was still gas, man. We get to see the first and most underrated power system within JoJo called Hormone, which is sun breathing, which was the direct opposite of vampires and zombies and stuff like that. I feel like Araki was tapped in. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, I can't hate, not lie, no nothing. He was tapped in. And then after that, well, I'm not gonna just skip over that like that. Will did die within that part that he was introduced, which is something I really do not like about part 1. Just a little bit more screen time would have been fine. What is it kills you to let him live for 5 or 6 episodes? God damn. But after this, we see Dio vs. Jonathan 3. This is the third of the trilogy, and what you would think would be the final one, because Jonathan low-key pieced Dio up. Even though Dio was moving scarily when they started, like other Hormone Masters came up, tried to take Dio, froze their legs, come here. Yeah, he was doing people dirty. But Jonathan prevailed, and not only did he prevail, he cut his head off and put it down a hill. Only for one of his minions to find him. Dio is still alive, talking and functional, and Dio says, Jonathan is now my greatest rival. I need him. And that is not good to hear. Now, one of the things I haven't really talked about in this video is definitely the setting and the aesthetic of part 1. Being an 1800s English nobleman, it's somewhat cool, but it is also really interesting to see how David Productions took on the dark, gritty tone, because a lot of part 1 is set in the dark, which makes sense because Dio's there. He's a vampire. But it adds to like the character of both Dio and Jonathan, I feel like. But anyway, Dio, then he plots. He just sits in his tube with his head and waits. Meanwhile, Jonathan, he's living his best life. He just got married. I love that part. Like, most of part 1, I really enjoy. But the ending, I love with the difference specifically because it's like my top 3 favorite ending. Just because of how gut-wrenching it is. You would think Jonathan gets a normal ending, but he doesn't. Even after his brother, who had been making his life hell for 10 years at this point, he thought he defeated him. He didn't. Because he shows up on his wedding day for Dio versus Jonathan 4. But this time, Dio would prevail. Kind of. Arena made it out, but Jonathan just couldn't. You know, you could say Dio kind of prevailed, but at the same time, you could argue he didn't, because again, Jonathan almost got him. He almost got Dio. But there are a lot of things I did love about part 1. Like, part 1 was definitely a great trendsetter for the anime to come. It was like the warning shot before we get the real heavy stuff in part 2, 3, basically in every part after. Because even part 1 went really deep into where they wanted to go. Like, Araki had a clear direction on what he was feeling for this story just playing out. I could see that. But to finish this video off, I give part 7 a smooth 7 out of 10. As a matter of fact, I'll bump it up to a 7.5. Part 1, I enjoyed it. Now, is it still the worst part in my opinion? Yes. But is it that far from the other parts? No. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. We're on the road to 2K. We just hit 1.7K, so thank y'all. And until next time, peace.